back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast, where we'll be previewing Haydock and Ascot, some graded racing action this weekend. Before we do so, we come off the back of an excellent weekend, and I don't know about listeners, I don't know about TC and Ross, but I really enjoyed Cheltenham all weekend. It was a excellent watch. It was some brilliant finishes, lots of drama, but some really good competitive action. What National Hunt Racing is all about, really. And delighted that we got some winners for the podcast as well. Ross, Springwell Bay at 9-4 beat TC's Grey Name. That was in the end, quite easy for Springwell Bay. I thought it was a good performance. But TC delighted to find the winner of the Great Wood and Iberico Lord at 7-1. Tipped up on and talked about, waxed lyrical about on the National Hunt podcast preview. So if you haven't listened to that yet, we've already given you so many winners from that podcast. So you're missing out. You've already missed out. And we'll get into more of that. But also there was a placed effort with Fugitive at 12-1. So a 7-1 winner of the Great Wood, and Fugitive at 12-1 was placed in the big Gold Cup Chase, which was won impressively by Stage Star. But we'll go into this weekend, and off the back of what, as I mentioned, was an excellent weekend of racing. It's really quite disappointing to see small field sizes for a couple of what has traditionally been some really proper horse races, the Betfair Chase and the Ascot Hurdle. We'll go into it. First of all, Ross, great weekend last weekend, I have to say. So when credit is due, we have to mention how great the racing is. But why do we face a weekend like this off the back of a weekend like we had last weekend? Do we have too many options? Do we not have enough good, talented horses? Because our field sizes for the Betfair Chase of 4 and for the Ascot Hurdle of just 5 is extremely disappointing.
Yeah, and then you throw in the Ascot Chase as well, and that's, not exactly full of talented types. So you have to match your product, i.e. the races, to your customers, which in this instance we're talking about the horses and the trainers, and they're not simply not doing that, are they? There's too many options, so trainers aren't forced to run horses in sort of against each other until Cheltenham. They can easily dodge each other till then, which makes for, as far as I'm concerned, an unsatisfactory wait to the season, because as you know, I try not to mention the Cheltenham Festival until at least after all my mince pies have gone, and even then it's a bit early. We had a walkover in a novice chase, so that tells you that they're not serving the novice horses right. It is a bit of a mess, but yes, too much racing. But that comes down to many things, and it's not an easy fix. I do get that, and I'm not putting my hand up saying I'd like to be the person in charge of fixing it. But from the sidelines, from what we had last weekend, which were good fields and competitive races and classy horses, and okay, the real whacker didn't deliver, but they ran him under a big weight off a high mark, as did Stage Star to a degree. Okay, he was well served by the fact the real whacker was there. It does say that you can get competitive races, but it's clearly not all just about money, and it's clearly not all about prestige. So they've got to somehow all get their heads together and figure it out. But I'm afraid the getting their heads together bit is not great in British racing at the moment. There's a lot of fractions that appear not to like to talk to each other all that much.
Yeah, quite right. I was there for that walkover yesterday at Warwick, and I think Dan Skelton spoke a lot of sense about the amount of racing that we have and just not making sense midweek. But weekends is when we have our customers and listeners and the like watching the majority of. So what's gone wrong? We could be here for hours talking about it, but we do want to preview the Betfair Chase. It's just a warning and a message to everyone that unfortunately we don't have a competitive, really betting race, and we will get to and we'll give more detail on the horses that I think TC and Ross really do like this weekend that are better prices, and that's what we all want. But we've got to give these Grade 1 horses their mention, and we've got Bravemansgame, we've got Correct Rambler, Protectorat, last year's winner, and Royal Pagaille. No Irish runner, which is a bit of a shame considering a Plutard turned up last 2 years and he won this race 2 years ago as well. But for whatever reason, the Irish are staying at home, and this is what we have got. TC, I say, it's not really a betting heat because there are 4 runners, and we've got essentially even money favourite, probably justified in Bravemansgame. Daryl Jacob coming on. what do you make of this? It's probably more of a news story race than a betting race, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. It's completely a news story race. And I don't know about you guys or anyone else actually in the industry, but I wasn't anticipating Daryl Jacob to be the substitute rider for Bravemansgame. Look, Harry Cobden is, in my opinion, and I'm sure in plenty of others, the best jumps jockey in the country right now. So the fact that he's not on board it has to be a negative no matter what. And I just don't have much luck backing Daryl Jacob. I mean, it's some kind of coincidence, but it just doesn't work out for me. Saying that, this race has no depth whatsoever. I mean, Royal Pagaille coming off the long layoff and hasn't won for a long time. Corrick Rambler's not going to be primed for this, just working their way through the season until the spring. So you basically got a match race between Bravemansgame and Protectorat. Protectorat won the race last year. There's your case for him. But who did he beat last year? He beat A Plus Tard, who didn't turn up on the day. He beat Frodon, who hasn't won for a long time, is probably a grade 3 horse now. Beat Bristol de Mai, who was 11 at the time and, was a veteran at that stage of his career. And Eldorado Allen, who hasn't won since February 2022 and just isn't a top-class horse either. So, albeit Protectorat does have the winning form in this race, it wasn't a very good renewal. And Bravemansgame is just a big step up on that. If Bravemansgame does come back and Daryl rides him as well as he possibly can, then even money is probably a good bet. But as you say, this isn't a betting race for me. It's more of a news story. Will Daryl get the job done? And what's going to come out of this with Harry Cobden?
Yeah, it's been a bit strange, I think, the rhetoric around this, that it was sort of quite accepted that obviously he's got a big book of rides at Ascot, Harry, including the likes of Pic D'Orhy, and there's also the argument that Johnny De La Haye, the owner of Pic D'Orhy, has got many more horses than Brian Drew does, and who owns Bravemansgame. So Harry Cobden should be on board the horses of the owners that sort of dominate that yard. It didn't really work that. I think there's more that meets the eye there. I just wonder, Ross, looking at what he did at Wetherby last time and seeing it, he got beaten. You could just conclude that Harry Cobden didn't get the job done, hasn't got the job done the last 3 occasions, rightly or wrongly. I think Bravemansgame personally has run big races regardless. That run at Punchestown was after a big run at Cheltenham. So what do you make of it all? And what do you think Daryl Jacob is going to do to try and win this race and importantly beat last year's winner Protectorat?
I think we're not being told everything, and that's fine. Why should we be told? In sport, what goes on in the change room stays in the change room. So I get that. There's absolutely no way in the world that Harry Cobden's been jocked off for not getting the job done. He was second in the Gold Cup. The horse made a mistake when tired at the last fence in the Charlie Hall. So, I think the owners are pretty vocal, the Drews, but I'd be very surprised if Paul Nicholls was taking anything of that sort. I think he would hold weight there. And yes, Johnny De La Haye does have more horses. I think they said he had 16 versus the Drews, and the Drews have their horses spread around, whereas, as I understand it, Johnny De La Haye has all of his horses with Paul Nicholls. But by that token, are we saying that Paul Townend would get off Galloping de Champs to go and ride a Rich Ritchie horse if Galloping de Champs coming back and they've got a full book of rides down at Limerick or something? It just doesn't happen. So that's a bit strange. For me, the jockey booking blew my hat off. You can see it's gone, and most of my hair went too. I just don't see it. And they say that it's great to have someone that could step in if Harry was injured for the King George. Well, last time I checked, Daryl Jacob has got a retained position with arguably the biggest owners in the UK, or certainly the second biggest owners if you take JP out of it. And there's Christmas racing in Ireland, where Paul Townend will go where he wants to go, which might mean that Daryl Jacob is sent to Ireland to ride for Isaac and Simon Munir and Suede. It just seems bizarre to me. And as a jockey, he doesn't do it for me. I think he's far too passive in the majority of his rides. He always seems to me to be a jockey that lets the race develop around him. I very rarely see him grab the race by the scruff of the neck. And it just so happened that on the very day that was announced, Bryony Frost gave one of the best rides you'll see on a horse that had been off the track for 600 days at Plumpton, pinged from fence to fence, actually is by Bravemansgame, the same sire, incidentally enough. It just seems a very strange decision all round. In terms of what I make of the race, it's not a race that I will be having a financial opinion in. but I can always give an opinion on a horse race. Protectorat's just a horse that has never really done it for me. I think TC was right. Questionable what he won last year, and I think he ran to his level in the Gold Cup, and that's a better race to assess him on. Corrit Rambler, I could see the angle for him. I think he'll step forward from Calso. I don't think that was his track, and I think they probably had him a little bit undercooked. But all of his best form comes in large field handicaps where he can weave in and out. Derek Fox can keep him interested and pounce late. That's very difficult to do when you've just got three others. Bravemansgame, I'm just very surprised they're running him if they want to go to the King George. I think he had a tough enough race in the Charlie Hall, and I'm sure that will have brought him forwards, but it's not that quick a turnaround. He tends to me to be a horse I think that's best when fresh. So just at a short price, I could leave him, which leaves as the sort of token opinion Royal Pagaille, who has been off the track for a while, but it's actually a shorter turnaround than when he made his seasonal reappearance last year in the King George. I think Haydock is more his track than Kempton. Any rain that might fall, and I don't think there is going to be any, but if it did, that would suit him. He's a strong stayer. All of his best form pretty much has come at Haydock. I don't think first time out is a problem. Venetia Williams is the hottest trainer in the UK at the moment. So clubbing those ideas together, he would be, if I was given a £5 free bet, that's where it would go. But it's a race I'll watch and no doubt have a fairly dull opinion of afterwards.
Yeah, I agreed with you, Ross. I think it's a disappointment. I think Venetia Williams' horse is in great form. Difficult to know what horse we'll see in shape of Royal Pagaille on Saturday, but like to hope that he might throw something in, but it's not a betting race for me either. And I think we could say the same for the Ascot Hurdle, the 205. We'll have a quick look through this because, again, a race shaped by some horses that have been in and out in terms of their race record. Tom, I'm not sure if you have much opinion, deep opinion. Obviously, Goshen is coming to defend his crown, but what kind of horse do we have this year? So Royal, he's getting to the end of his tether a little bit. And then we've got some younger pretenders. Maybe it's their time to sort of shape up, which is quite a average-looking intermediate hurdle division.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is probably a race where you take a shot at a horse at a bigger price. Look, it's another small field, another race that's not got great quality in it. You used to have to run to a mark of 160 to win this race, which is laughable really now based on the field that we can see for this year's renewal. I mean, previous winners included like Vanny Power, Forheen. We also had Yanworth as well, and there were plenty of others that are very talented, just don't have that this time around. Now, there's actually only two horses in this field that have ever run to a mark higher than 143. And they're Goshen and So Royale. But as you said, So Royale's now 11. Goshen doesn't have Jamie Moore. He's super enigmatic. I just don't trust him one bit. So how can I bet him at 2-1? I can't. So I have to look at a bigger price. I'm going to side with Strong Leader. You can't have him on figures. He just isn't good enough based on official ratings. But at the same time, he's only had 8 starts. He's won half of them, and he's still improving. He's a horse that will love the faster conditions. The weather seems to be fair for the next couple of days, and it's already around good to soft. So that will suit him. And I thought he ran an excellent second to a horse that you really like, Jess, in The Pocket, back at Aintree in the Grade 1 Novices Hurdle. His first run this season was pretty below par. He finished last. I think it was a Foss last, but I'm expecting him to come on for that. And he's the biggest price in the field. So I'll take Strong Leader. But again, it's another tentative race where I just don't like the favourite.
Yeah, Strong Leader, it was a bit alarming how poorly he ran in the Welsh Champion Hurdle, but I'm sure, and I know that Ollie Murphy's always held this horse in extremely high regard. Ross, what do you make of the sort of younger pretenders? You've got Blue Kinduru in there as well. The mare, Theatre Glory. I don't really know how high her level is, but it looks like, in my opinion, a race where you could probably take on the favourites.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I agree with what TC said about Goshen. It's a big ask for Niall Houlihan, and I know he won it on better ground last year, but that was a real rabbit out the hat, wasn't it? All his best form is on testing ground. The one thing I would just say is he is a weird character, and Jamie Moore is a very strong rider, and he's only ever gone for Jamie Moore because Jamie Moore's the only one to ever ride him. And it could just be that sometimes with these strong-minded horses, actually meeting someone that's not so strong and doesn't know them quite so well might just happen upon sort of a happy harmony. But that's, it'll go one way or the other. It'd be interesting to watch from a horseman's point of view, as far as I'm concerned, which is one of the more interesting angles in this race, if I'm honest. Blue Kinduru, I think, is definitely better than the level of form he showed at Cheltenham last time. To me, he had the race one turning in. That was where he was most impressive. And then he idled and got a bit tired up the hill. And I think that was fair enough because a lot of Paul Nicholls are doing that first time out. So he was of interest, but I just thought his entry level of form, when beaten behind punctuation, and he was getting weight £5 for punctuation. Punctuation was only 8th in the Greatwood Hurdle, and kind of had his condition. So that just put me off him. Strong Leader was a horse I loved, and I loved him last year, but it was woeful at Fosslas, and there was no Ollie Murphy wasn't able to come out and say why it happened, and that always slightly concerns me. So it was the mare Theatre Glory that I came down on. She got pretty close to Goshen at Sandown last year. That was more his ground, more his track. I think she's got more natural pace than him. This better ground will suit. And Nikki Henderson is going along really well at the moment and seems to be able to get them ready first time out, which, we often would think that they come forward for a run. And I'm sure Iberica Lord will come forward for a run, but he was more than good enough last weekend in the Greatwood. So I just liked that one. And then just one other reason to go against Goshen, which is worth mentioning. Gary Moore is just 7% for the last 14 days, and that 7% includes 2 winners of pretty much egg and spoon races at Plumpton that they were very short price favourites. The yard's just not in great form. Goshen is not the sort of horse that tends to go against yard trends. So yeah, definitely a horse that's worth opposing.
Yeah. On that note, though, I have to say, all our best wishes to Jamie Moore, who's out again with like a seriously bad injury, and I think anything would be a nice tonic for them in the family. They've all gone through the wards, the Moore family, so it's not a great time for Jamie. But look, I couldn't be with him as well. I think it's a funny race. Blook and Daru should have really ran in the Greatwood, but I saw a comment from Paul Nicholls say that Johnny Delahaye likes to have his runners at Ascot. That's why it's quite a big day for him. He's got plenty of them. And I just think he's quite interesting, an unexposed horse who's clearly improved from a wind operation. I don't think it's going to take a huge amount of winning. He seems quite straightforward, whereas some of them are a little bit uncertain about, what kind of horse they'll turn up. So I'm happy to side with Blook and Daru. But again, it's not really a betting race. So we will move swiftly into our perhaps the next best, because I think outside of the obvious grade 1 races, there's some really good competitive sort of handicaps at Haydock, definitely. I'll start with you, Tom, because it was a nice weekend for you last weekend. Another reason to plug our National Hunt preview podcast, because it's all done very well. This weekend, we've got, as I said, good racing at Haydock. We've got your favourite. We've got some more weather action too. So let us know what you want to give us this weekend.
Well, I'm out in Saudi Arabia, as you can see from the backdrop, and you can see the lovely all-weather track here. And my nap is going to be on the all-weather, not in Saudi Arabia. Don't worry about that. It's coming at Lingfield in the 12:35. A horse called the Thames Boatman. Now, this horse comes with risks attached, so putting him up as the nap is never ideal. It wasn't the original plan, but the horse I did like for my nap wasn't declared. So I moved this horse up from the next best position. I was in the Sky Sports studios 7 days ago when he ran at Wolverhampton in the evening card. He knocked a bit of the railing off on his way out. He just doesn't seem to like that track. He was unruly at the start, reared up as the gates were left open, and he missed 3 or 4 lengths. However, he was only beaten 1.5 at the line, and actually ran very well to finish 5th. He's a horse that's very well handicapped if he can just put it all together on the track, and I'm hoping that the switch to Lingfield will see him in better light. I'm sure that he's got the talent to beat this group. So the Thames Boatman in the 12:35 at Lingfield is the nap. And the next best does come on over jumps, and that is Slate Lane in the 2:20 at Haydock. He's around 6-1. I don't know what price he's going to go off. I've seen 7-2 with one firm, so that 6-1 may be just a one-off right now, maybe even a palp. And 7-2, 3-1 might be the right price. Emmett Mullins has campaigned him excellently well. 3 wins in Britain so far at Cartmel, Bangor, Newton Abbot, low-class races and second-tier tracks. But the 2 horses he's beaten recently were Horizon Door at Bangor, and then at Newton Abbot he beat a horse called Tommy Bow. Both of those have subsequently won 2 races, boosting his form dramatically. And Slate Lane beat them without coming off the bridle. Now, I know his mark has gone much higher now. I think it's 127, and he last raced off 113. But at the same time, Mullins would have wanted that so he could get into a race of this nature. He carries a relatively low weight. I think he's still very well handicapped. So Slate Lane in the 2:20 at Haydock is my next best.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a really good race. I like the race, and one of my selections is in there as well. And that's Stayers Handicap Hurdle. TC, thank you, and enjoy the lovely weather. Extremely envious as we sit here freezing. Ross, another plug for that National Hunt podcast, because it's for me Favour and Fortune. John Bond of all one for you. We've got Chianti Classico, one of your horses to follow, declared at Ascot on Saturday, but unfortunately, in a 3-horse race. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're not going to be putting him up as a nap selection, but looking forward to seeing him, I'm sure. What else are you looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, there's a couple more at Ascot and a good few at Haydock. So I hope I've come down on the right two. It's always less enjoyable sometimes when you have more to pick from. But in the 12:40, the nap comes, and it's Real Stone for Dan and Harry Skelton. Was a little bit disappointing on seasonal return at Aintree, but Dan has been pretty vocal in the fact that he feels it's been difficult to get them ready because of the weather this year. They're all stepping forward a lot for their first run. This horse is a 2-miler. Was second at Uttoxeter last year behind Blackjack Magic, who went on to win the Badger Beers this year. That was a good level of form, and he travelled all over him coming to the last, and then just empty to nothing over that trip. He just didn't stay. Strongly run 2 miles on soft enough ground. Perfect round Haydock. Nice long home straight to get rolling up. I would be disappointed if Real Stone doesn't land the 12:40. And then the next best comes in the last race of the day at Haydock, the Trevor Hemmings colours, which I always like to see. Famous Bridge for Nicky Richards. Thought he made a fair return over 2 mile 4 furlongs at Ayr. He was staying on and then got a bit hampered and had to get going again, and it's to his credit he did. He finished 4th. I thought that was a decent run. I see him as more of a 3-miler. He's a typical Trevor Hemmings horse. He's an out-and-out stayer. This soft ground will suit. Step back up to 3 miles will suit. He's only a couple of pound above his last winning mark. Nicky Richards is being pretty selective with his runners, but he's at 25% winners to runners for the last 14 days. It would be unusual for a Nicky Richards horse not to take a step forward from his first run. They wouldn't be cherry ripe. So I'm hopeful that Famous Bridge will win the last at Haydock.
Okay, a reminder of the Naps and Next Best. TC has got the James Boatman at Lingfield in the 12:35 and Slate Lane in the 2:20 at Haydock. Ross, Real Stone in the 12:40 and Famous Bridge in the 3:35 at Haydock. And in keeping with the Trevor Hemmings theme, my nap is Bones Park, a horse that was in my horse to follow, absolutely bolted up on his win in his first start of this season. The victory coming at Stratford. This form hasn't been massively tested. He's now in a graded race at Haydock, and it's got a lot of depth to it, but I'm just excited about this horse. I think that he's got a good future, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in this kind of grade. I think it's kind of quite open. There's no obvious horse that sort of stands out outside of him, really, in my opinion. And my next best is Bold Endeavour, who does have top weight in that 2:20, where I'll be taking on TC, who's got Slate Lane. But he's a horse, he's a funny one. He looked like he was just a bit keen on his comeback run at Newbury. I thought that, again, having to handle top weight it was always going to be tricky for him. The handicapper hasn't been very kind to him, but still quite unexposed at this trip. And he's just a horse that always turns up, and he's a double-figure price. He's around 14-1, and I've got hope for him. Got James Bowen on board, which I always like to see. Nico's obviously at Ascot. James Bowen, good pilot, will give him a confident ride, as his brother always does, Sean, and I'm looking forward to seeing him on Bold Endeavour in the 2:20 at Haydock. So that's it. Again, another plug. As I mentioned, I've told you so many times now, so if it hasn't got into you all, have a listen to our jumps preview. So much good stuff coming out of that in recent weeks. So make sure that you write down all of the horses to follow. Hope you have a good weekend. All we can say is enjoy the racing as much as you can, despite those small field sizes. Hopefully we'll have some bigger sizes for you next week. A reminder that SBK Betting Podcast has launched a new football podcast, which will be previewing Man City versus Liverpool and giving the best bets for a very busy weekend of football action in England. So for all football fans who love their racing as well, make sure you listen to that. It will appear on the same feed as this very podcast. So without further ado, thanks to Tom, thanks to Ross.